Northwest Now is supported, in part, by viewers like you. Thank you.
Neither the bond market nor the Fed seems to be in any rush to lower interest rates. And while home prices have slowed their meteoric rise, it doesn't mean getting into a home is getting any easier. Tonight, it's our annual discussion with a panel of experts talking about what's likely one of the largest investments you'll ever make, your home. And our Steve Kiggins on the debate over rent control, possibly coming to a state near you. Real estate is the discussion next on Northwest Now. The typical home in Washington statewide is worth just about $600,000. And again, that includes central and eastern Washington. The Northwest MLS reported prices were up 9.5% in the first quarter, implying a 44% increase by the end of the year. Now, that's unlikely to happen, but I've been wrong before. The Republican caucus recently put out a chart showing that Washington is number 4 nationwide for unaffordability. That's behind only Hawaii, California, and New York. Here in Western Washington, condo prices surged almost 30% in January in both Seattle and the East Side as buyers sought alternatives to steep home prices. Inventory is going up, but there are still only about 2 months of supply on the market on average, so it's still a seller's market since the conventional wisdom is that a 6-month supply is balanced between buyers and sellers. According to the latest MLS report, the median price in King County is $855,000, in Snohomish $755,000, and in Pierce and Kitsap counties $555,000. Now, renting a home, possibly from a multinational hedge fund like Blackstone, is an alternative for would-be buyers who can't make it into a house. But renting brings risk if rents skyrocket. As Steve Kiggins tells us now, this is why the legislature is talking about rent control.
Rent control has been illegal in Washington state since the 1980s, but not anymore. Governor Bob Ferguson signed House Bill 1217 into law in the first week of May. This legislation caps rent increases to 7% plus inflation every year. Advocates insist this legislation helps keep vulnerable families from being kicked on the streets. But opponents insist this kind of legislation spooks developers, strangles housing supply, and increases rent.
The rent is too damn high!
Dozens demonstrated on the steps of the legislative building in Olympia back in April, demanding lawmakers combat runaway housing costs in communities across Washington.
We clearly need more renter protections.
Single mom Andrea Bernard joined the rally, and after watching neighbors see double-digit rent increases year after year, she worries she'll soon be priced out of Washington without protection.
Yeah, if I left Seattle, I would need and deserve, just like every other renter, basic protections for some sense of stability.
Organizations like the Washington Low-Income Housing Alliance urge legislators to keep rent increases predictable.
Washington State right now has the highest evictions ever in history. And it's because people can't afford their rent increases. So where do people go? They go to the streets.
With utility costs rising and so much in the future being uncertain, including my state grants, it's hard to feel secure. I still have 3 years left in my degree, and I don't know if I'll be able to afford to stay through the end.
For weeks, lawmakers heard testimony from renters desperate for relief.
Elder tenants have endured 50% rent increases, with many now paying over 70% of their low fixed Social Security income on housing. They come to me in tears saying they fear homelessness.
This will drive investment into other states. This will decrease our ability to build.
They also heard from developers and landlords warning rent control scares off development and does little to impact rent prices in the long term.
We cannot afford to rent if we can't turn a profit.
House Bill 1217 caps rent increases to 7% plus inflation, up to 10% each year, whichever is lower. Rent for manufactured homes caps at 5%. The bill includes some limitations, and caps on rent for apartments and homes sunset in 15 years. Democrats passed the bill without bipartisan support. Republicans warned regulation ultimately hurts renters and pushes development elsewhere.
The only real predictability that tenants in Washington state are going to have is the assurance that their rent is going to go up 10% a year, year over year.
This is a great bill for Idaho, this is a great bill for Montana, and this is an amazing bill for Arizona.
How do we find the right balance?
University of Washington Real Estate Associate Professor Greg Colburn co-authored Homelessness is a Housing Problem. During a presentation sponsored by the Seattle Public Library Foundation last fall, Colburn shared his research and touched on rent control's controversy.
I'd much rather have a whole bunch of housing built and some subsidies. That to me is an easier path to affordability than regulating the private market, but those things cost money. And so in the absence of resources to do that, then this is where we go.
We've got a crisis on our hands here in Washington State.
Governor Bob Ferguson says House Bill 1217 ensures sudden and large rent increases don't destabilize families. Together with another 9 bills signed into law in early May, Ferguson aims to make building affordable housing easier, even as opponents worry regulation deters investment. What's your concern from developers who claim that this kind of legislation, 1217, just spooks them out of the state?
Yeah, I mean, look, I'm confident that this legislation is going to work for everybody in our state. And what we need to have is a balanced approach, right? We need more housing. We need folks to construct that housing. We need folks to rent that housing.
In Seattle, Steve Kiggins, Northwest Now.